The Democrats' government shutdown stunt just collapsed spectacularly. After 21 days of political theater, Chuck Schumer's supposed grand strategy to hurt President Trump politically has become his own greatest liability. Stick with me at the very end of this video because we're going to see how President Trump and Speaker Mike Johnson masterfully outmaneuvered the Democrats, what polling reveals about this political earthquake, and why more and more Democrats are now quietly breaking ranks. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, here to help you make sense of the madness as the far left desperately tries to stop the unstoppable rise of a new conservative age that you're making happen all over the world. So if you want a front row seat on how you're changing the world in ways you never even imagined, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Chuck Schumer, the single most unpopular senator on Capitol Hill, just a 17% approval rating, orchestrated this current government shutdown, refusing repeatedly to vote for the very continuing resolution he so enthusiastically voted for just mere months ago, back in March. Yeah, that same Chuck Schumer, he orchestrated this shutdown with one goal: manufacture a crisis that would damage President Trump and the Republicans politically. Ironically, and to the Democrats' horror, the opposite happened. According to CNN polling data, Trump's net approval rating has actually increased by 1 point during the shutdown, while blame directed at him dropped from 61% during the 2018-2019 shutdown to just 48% today, a stunning 13-point decline. So the very shutdown that was orchestrated to hurt Trump only ended up helping him. Far from being politically damaged by the shutdown, Trump has actually gained in popularity. So this is the very definition of a backfire, and it gets worse. Every poll out there shows that an overwhelming majority, more than 60%, want the Democrats to open the government before they deliberate over the health care issues they're holding out over. And that's consistent with how voter sentiment tends to assess government shutdowns. So historically speaking, the party that's making the demands, the party that's holding out, inevitably and quite logically gets blamed for the shutdown. That's why Harvard-Harris found that 62% of respondents, you heard that right, 62% believe that it's the Republicans that will come out of the shutdown victorious. The party making the demands is the party that ultimately gets the blame. It's really that simple. And again, we're seeing it in the fact that President Trump's approval numbers have actually gone up since the shutdown. Now, the Democrats' fatal miscalculation in all of this, I would argue, is that they assumed that this would play out like previous shutdowns. So the legacy media, like they always do, would carry the water of the Democrats. They would exploit their mass communications platforms and campaign and advocate 24/7 on behalf of the Democrats, which they certainly have been doing, which in times past has had an inordinate influence on public opinion. We most certainly saw this during the Clinton era with the Gingrich-Clinton standoff, the government shutdown there during the 90s. We saw that with Obama and Boehner and all that. Those days are over. If you're a regular to this channel, and if not, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. But if you're a regular, you'll know that in the last couple of decades, a new social order has emerged that has taken the legacy media completely by surprise. It's a social order that scholars often refer to as the third industrial revolution. The legacy media was part of what's called the second industrial revolution. That's the age of mass society, where in the 19th and 20th centuries, you have the rise of mass urban cosmopolitan centers that were formed, and the legacy media became the mass communication network embedded in between these centers. So you have the New York Times, you have the Washington Post, you have the LA Times, you got the Chicago Tribune, you got the Boston Herald, you got the Philadelphia Inquirer. This is the age of mass society. But today, increasingly, we're living in a very different social order. And that's what's known as the network society, where we're all socially connected through online and cyber networks, most particularly the internet. And through that hyperconnectivity, we have access to information that once used to be the privileged possession, literally in a monopolistic fashion, of the legacy media. So now, with that information having been decentralized and dispersed and democratized among the masses, we can now access the very same information that anyone at CNN or the New York Times has. And therefore, we, the people, are in a position to fact check them. So they just simply don't have the influence to sway public opinion the way they used to. So the Democrats can't win this on the basis of media bias alone, which has thus far been their go-to strategy in all matters of political standoffs. But then you have the whole No Kings fiasco this past weekend. We're now learning that the Democrats delayed reopening the government specifically to try to galvanize and rally more and more people across the country to gather and assemble for this No Kings rally, which of course is itself a performative contradiction. We've talked about that in yesterday's video, because if we really did have a king, they'd all be committing treason and therefore they'd all be arrested. If we really did have an authoritarian dictator, they would never have been permitted to protest in the first place. So the very fact that you even have No Kings rallies at all is proof positive that we don't have a king, that we don't have an authoritarian dictator. So their own actions end up refuting their claims. But regardless, we're getting word on Capitol Hill now that with the boomer bust now over, more and more Democrat senators are going to want to end the shutdown probably as early as this week. But here's the devastating irony in all of this. You'll notice that the rallies barely ever mentioned the shutdown. Protesters talked about Trump. They talked about immigration enforcement. They talked about virtually everything except the government shutdown. And Trump himself reminded the protesters that were he truly a king, the government would never have shut down in the first place. Chuck Schumer stood before a pathetic, paltry crowd in D.C. at their No Kings rally, which, by the way, dissipated by 2:30 p.m. And by the way, that itself is ironic. Chuck Schumer standing before a No Kings crowd. Chuck Schumer has been in D.C. for 40 freaking years. He's been there for a literal lifetime, adult lifetime. Nancy Pelosi, same thing, 43 years, something like that. In his speech, he never once championed the shutdown, not once. Why? That's exactly what we're about to find out. But have you noticed that all of this is happening at the exact moment when Trump's economic policies are reshaping global finance? So, for example, you've seen gold and silver prices absolutely skyrocketing of late. I mean, skyrocketing. What's so key here is that's not coincidence. It's the direct result of President Trump's pro-growth agenda, right? Lower interest rates, strategic dollar weakening to boost American exports, and policies designed to rebuild domestic manufacturing. Goldman Sachs actually just raised their 2026 gold outlook to $4,900 per ounce. Many analysts think they're actually being too conservative. We got over 3 more years of these America First policies ahead of us, which means this upward trajectory ain't slowing down anytime soon. This is exactly why smart Americans are taking control of their retirement accounts by backing them with physical gold and silver. My friends over at Augusta Precious Metals understand that in times of economic warfare, whether it's against Antifa's financiers or foreign adversaries, you need assets that can't be manipulated by the same corrupt system Trump is fighting. Augusta works with Americans who have over $50,000 in their IRAs, 401ks, or other retirement accounts to make the smart move into smart money. The economy is changing rapidly, but gold and silver have always been used to store wealth through good times and bad. Reach out to Augusta by going to turleygold.com. That's turleygold.com. You can also call them at 844-763-3908 or text Turley to 35052. That's 35052. Central banks around the world are stocking up on gold and silver as we speak. If central banks thought gold and silver had peaked, they wouldn't be buying so much of it today. Let Augusta Precious Metals answer all of your questions with their educational, zero-pressure approach to gold IRAs. Go to turleygold.com or text Turley to 35052, and you get instant access to a free 2-minute report that reveals the greatest threat to your retirement today. The economy is changing rapidly, but gold and silver have stored wealth through every crisis in human history. While Trump wages financial war against the radical left money machine, shouldn't you be protecting your own wealth with the same assets central banks are hoarding? Go to turleygold.com. That's turleygold.com or text Turley to 35052 for instant access to a free report revealing the greatest threat to your retirement today. Bottom line, the reason why the Democrats ran away from this Schumer shutdown over the weekend is because they're losing the issue. It is a blatantly losing issue. Scott Adams said it beautifully. Trump already won the government shutdown battle, at least with the public. Now Democrats need some face-saving way to back down and reopen. But Trump probably doesn't care either way. Democrats need a fake because to reopen government. Perhaps they can now claim reopening is the only way Democrats can stop Trump from stealing your democracy. You know, by the way, that's exactly what we pointed out in our video yesterday. Trump is riding such a political high right now. I mean, he might decide, you know what? I kind of like this shutdown. Me and Russ vote. We got all this power to fire and to cut and dismantle and abolish. I don't think I want to give up this power. Yeah, isn't it ironic that in shutting down the government, the Democrats basically gave Trump the powers of a king? I could totally see Trump trolling the Democrats with that. At the very least, I could see him keeping the government shut down, I don't know, another week or two after the Democrats begged to have it reopen. Either way, the cracks in Schumer's coalition are now becoming more and more visible. So Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire, she's come out and said that she now supports opening the government. She's not alone. We already have 3 Democrat senators consistently breaking ranks, voting to reopen the government. And that number is just going to continue to grow, inevitably. Republicans, meanwhile, have remained unified. 52 of 53 Republican senators back reopening immediately with a clean continuing resolution. No riders, no poison pills, just funding the government at current levels. Rand Paul being the lunatic libertarian that he is. Sorry, libertarians. But you guys just don't know who, you seem to 50% of the time don't know who the enemy is. But he is the lone vote against the opening of the government. No, I mean, he never has a coalition. He never has a coherent vision, just more performative antics so he can raise more money for himself. I have no patience for that kind of ideological lunacy. But regardless, if Schumer does not capitulate this week, Trump and Budget Director Ross Vought are prepared to deploy stronger measures. You have all the political leverage here. Trump has already announced he's cutting Democrat programs permanently, including a $20 billion infrastructure project in the Hudson Valley in New York. Schumer spent 15 years trying to put that together. That's gone. Boom. Dead. Not coming back. And they'll just keep going. They're freezing billions of dollars for Chicago transit systems, the Cape Cod Canal bridges in Massachusetts. Trump's cut billions in blue state clean energy projects like the California Hydrogen Hub and the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub. All blue states, all getting cut off. And they're looking at eliminating another 10,000 federal jobs this week. I mean, he and Russ Vought are just having a blast. They're having fun. And so this shutdown really reveals the fundamental difference between Trump's second term and traditional Republican governance. Previous GOP leaders would have negotiated, compromised, and ultimately surrendered to end the standoff and make peace with the Democrats. Think about how we saw Paul Ryan do that virtually every time. Think about how it sunk the Bush senior presidency with his betraying his "Read My Lips" pledge. Trump is using executive authority to advance his agenda actually during the shutdown, making Democrats' obstruction increasingly costly to their own blue state priorities. The Democrats gambled that public opinion would turn against Trump, as it did in 2018-2019. Instead, Americans recognized this shutdown for what it is: a desperate attempt by progressives to preserve benefits for illegal migrants that voters explicitly rejected at the ballot box. Chuck Schumer's the Schumer surrender? Is that what we're going with? The Schumer surrender isn't just imminent, it is inevitable. The only question is how much political capital Democrats will burn before acknowledging what the polling already shows: they've already lost. Do you want to ask me your biggest questions and maybe win free merch while you're at it? Well, join my Courageous Patriot Club and be part of the uncensored Monday night Q&A, all for only $10 a month at turley.pub/club.